Hi everybody. I wanted to talk to you about domains and rational functions and just clear up some ideas, hopefully, about when domains are not all real numbers and how to find the domain if it's not all real numbers. So let's start with the definition domain. Domain is all of the values of x that do not result in an undefined value. So we're trying to avoid any values of x that result in the whole function being undefined. So let's look at an example. So this function is f of x is equal to 1/2. There's no value of x that I can put into this function that would result in this being undefined because it's always 1/2. So the domain would be all real numbers. And we can either say that in words or we can use this cool symbol that stands for all real numbers. Okay, so another example, f of x is equal to x. Now when I put in values of x, it will change the function, but there's no value of x that would result in this being undefined. If I chose, say, a value like 0, that can sometimes be dangerous depending on what's going on with our function, I would just get f of 0 is equal to 0. And that's okay. 0 is okay. So the domain here would still be all real numbers. All real numbers. Let's try another example. So now we have a fraction. Now there are values that might result in this being undefined. And in fact, 1/0 is undefined. Not to be confused with, let me do it in a different color, 0/1, which is just 0. So when I'm teaching my in-person class, I usually have some hand signals that I do to help us remember gestures. But since you can't see me, those will not work. So another way to remember would be underneath. When 0 is underneath, you have undefined. Underneath is undefined. Hopefully that helps you keep these two straight. So, because I know that underneath is undefined, f of 0 is equal to 1/0, and that is undefined. So our domain can include 0. So we would write all real numbers except 0. Which looks weird, but we can do it in words. We don't have to use the crazy symbols. So we can just say all real numbers except 0. Alright, let's try the next one. So here, it's not quite as obvious what's going to result in 0, but let's think about it. So I don't want 1/0. So I can't have x minus 1 be 0. This is bad. So I just have to figure out what values of x will make that happen. And by solving, I can see x is equal to 1. That will result in 0, and so that's the bad number I want to avoid. So I'm going to say the domain is all real numbers except 1. Because if I use 1, I'll get 0 in the denominator. So let's do one more example, and this one's far more complicated. Now I have to figure out how to know which values will give me 0 in the denominator. So what values of x will I plug in here that will give me 0 down here? And so what I'm going to do is just that. I'm going to set this equal to 0, and I'm going to solve for any numbers that will equal 0, because those are the numbers that I don't want in my domain. So x squared minus 4 is equal to 0. I have to be able to factor this, and this is a square, and this can be written as x squared minus 2 squared is equal to 0. So I have a difference of squares. So that would give me x minus 2, x plus 2 equals 0. So I have x minus 2 equals 0, or x plus 2 equals 0. So that gives me x is equal to either 2 or negative 2. Skipping ahead on that slide. So this is my result from solving the denominator. So the domain would now be all real numbers except 2 or negative 2. So what I would want to do in math terms would write the domain as a set notation is x such that x does not equal 2 and x does not equal 2. Sorry, negative 2. Negative 2. And that should be an or. Sorry about that. Or. So x cannot be negative 2 or x cannot be 2. Neither one of those. Remember, the mathematical or includes both. So this is the set notation. For what we've written in words. They mean the same thing. Alright, that helps clear up some of the domain issues. So remember, when I'm looking at a function, oh, wrong pen, whatever, f of x is equal to 1 over something. Whatever the something is down here, I set that equal to 0 and solve. So something equals 0, okay? And then your next step would be solve. Okay, and the domain is everything except the numbers that you solved for. So except these. So you set it equal to 0, and then you solve. The domain is everything except what you solved for, because that would be what makes it 0. Alright, I'll see you guys later.